Well, welcome to the Tony Robbins podcast. This is a really important and special podcast. I'm going to introduce you to a dear friend of mine who's been working on a project that really makes a difference in the world. And you hear people talk about that all the time, but we have all kinds of crises we face. But one of the most ugly, a subject no one wants to talk about, is human trafficking. And I've got a dear friend named Tim Ballard that's going to be joining us here, along with one of the co-founders of Angel Studios, because they have a brand new film coming out here, and it's called The Sound of Freedom. It is not a movie, it is a film. It is an action thriller, but it's based on the true story of Tim's life, a man who left the government as an agent, decided he was going to go save these children. And, you read a lot of, see a lot of films at the beginning, it says, based on a true story. This film is the true story. And I had the privilege of being one of the many executive producers of this film, but I'm here to share it with you because it is a mission for all of us to reach more people. Many of you know Sage and we took my 60th birthday, for example, and used it to raise funds in this area. And I was really grateful to have the help of so many of you. We raised $19 million that night, 14 million from you, and Sage and I put in 5. And now, along with Operation Underground Railroad and several other groups like Free a Girl, and the Marici Foundation over in Indonesia and in India, we've been able to participate in funding 28,000 of these rescues. I've actually gone out on some, so we'll touch on that. But I thought before we started, I've never done this before, is to show you the trailer of the film so you really get a sense that it's something you want to go see, and also take anyone you know to go see as well. So let's start just for a quick second with that.
I don't think I can do this job, Tim. As soon as I lay down, all I see are those kids' faces. How long you been doing this? 12 years. How do you do it?
It is the fastest growing international crime network that the world has ever seen. It has already passed the illegal arms trade, and soon it's going to pass the drug trade.
Señor Timoteo, tú rescatas niños, ¿verdad? Quizá puedas ayudarme a encontrar a mi hermana.
Imagine walking into a room right now, seeing an empty bed. What would we do?
Shivering stars drift around in the sky.
We're Homeland Security. We can't go off rescuing kids in Colombia.
This job tears you to pieces. This is my one chance to put those pieces back together.
We're talking about extracting an 11-year-old girl from an army of rebels.
Not just her. I'm talking about rescuing hundreds of kids.
She could be a block down the road, or she could be in Moscow, Bangkok, LA.
Over 2 million children a year are being sucked into the deepest recesses of hell. If we do nothing, someday it's going to reach the likes of you. What if this was your daughter?
Wherever I go, I find my way home.
Pretty powerful, huh? Well, today I'm going to share with you and introduce you now my dear friend Tim Ballard from Operation Underground Railroad, the man whose story this is really about, and also Jordan Harmon, who is the co-founder of Angel Studios. Many of you may know it because they also created The Chosen. Welcome, gentlemen.
Thank you for having us.
Tim, you and I are buddies. We've gone on trips together, had a lot of experiences together. Would you share with everyone how this journey really began for you and what this film is really about?
Yeah. And thanks so much, Tony. You've been such a great friend, great supporter. You are our largest donor to date. You really are. And your community as well. So thank you to all of them and your audience. And so this film depicts a real live event, a real event that happened to me and my family when I spent 12 years in the government as a special agent, undercover operator, 10 years on the border. And I got involved in a case in Colombia that required me to kind of push the limits a little further than I was probably supposed to. got myself committed emotionally and otherwise. And I was told, come home because there's no jurisdiction here. We're not satisfied with the amount of evidence you've provided and we're running out of money and come home. And I was devastated, because I knew that if I stayed, we could finish it. And I called my wife and she says, you're not coming home. Yeah, you're staying there. And I said, what? I mean, I thought it was a good idea until she didn't agree with, I thought it was a great idea to stay until she told me I had to stay. I thought she was going to give you the out.
Yeah, she'd be like, hey, come on home. Come on home.
Because I had to quit my job.
Your woman is very special.
I would have, but my wife just wouldn't let me.
And I'm like, what are you doing? You're not reading the right lines here. And then I fight. So then I start fighting my own position, arguing with her. And she ends the debate. And this didn't get into the film because they were trying to salvage my reputation because I would have looked really like the coward that I was in that moment. But she said to me, these are a direct quote. She said, I will not let you jeopardize my salvation by not doing this.
Wow.
And wow, that ended the debate. And then we plunged into this crazy case. And that's kind of the beginning of The Sound of Freedom. And what happens next is pretty insane.
Well, we don't want to give away the whole story, obviously, to give an experience of it. But your wife is an angel, I know, and you're far from a coward. I've been out on these trips. You're putting your life on the line every single time, Tim, and I have such respect for you. And what I love about this film is that it takes on a subject that's so difficult to talk about, but it turns it into the true story that it is. I mean, there's some details in there you and I both know that people think it's a manipulation to make the movie work, and it's exactly as it happened. But also, I think it's really beautiful to see the role that Jim Caviezel plays in this. He really plays it well. Tell me a little bit, why did you pick him? I know you were a fan of his work from some of the previous work you did with The Passion of Christ and I think the Count of Monte Cristo. Tell us, why did you get him involved? Why did you pick him? And how did you get him to join you on this incredible journey of this film?
Well, after the operation that went down in October 2014, it made national news. And we actually started getting inquiries from many big studios. And my wife was just like, no, she didn't feel good about him. I trust her. Obviously, I've already expressed that I trust her opinion greatly on these things. And then we got hit up by the right folks, and she felt right about it. But that feeling was always important to me. And when they asked me, who do you want to play you, right out of the gate, Jim Caviezel. One, because The Count of Monte Cristo is one of my favorite movies of all time. Also, I know that he's a person of faith, and Tony, how important that is to me. It's everything to me. I wouldn't do anything if I didn't believe that piece. And when you're picking Hollywood actors, I don't know who has that internal kind of light, that spirituality that's so important to me. But I knew Jim did. I knew he did, and so that's the main reason. And I think it proved to be the right person for the job. I mean, I think when you watch the film, he says more with his eyes than he does with his mouth. Yes. And that's that spiritual side that's the reason I chose him.
And it's probably the greatest performance of his career.
What's that, Jordan? I'm sorry?
I said it's probably one of the greatest performances of his career. It's incredible.
Yeah. I think this will be a nominee for Academy Award. I'm obviously close to it, but everyone I've shown it to who's in that level of the filmmaking business says this is not a movie, this is a film, and it's deeply moving. You can't watch this film and not be deeply impacted by it. Jim doesn't look anything like you, but he certainly has your heart and your soul. Why do you think he took the film? I know he has some personal reasons for it. Why don't you share with me what they were, if you don't mind?
Yeah, it was so crazy because, they went to him and they thought they'd get the typical, talk to my manager, you'll hear from us in a few months. But Eduardo Verastegui, the producer, who's also a friend of yours, obviously, Tony, and he just said he texted him right away. He says, Tim wants this, text him. He happened to have his number, and he said, let's meet tonight. He met that night. He before he read the script, he was in tears because Jim had, and I can say this now because he started to say it finally, but he adopted 3 children from China, and he adopted them out of trafficking situations. Yes. So it was so near and dear to, I had no idea when I asked him to do this. And so he was committed from day one, and he is committed. I mean, we talk all the time about it. He cares so deeply about it. He wants to be an ambassador forever.
That's so gorgeous. And I'm curious, when you first read the script, and I want to hear your response to this, obviously, Jordan, because you're the one helping to make this happen now. Alejandro Monteverde is a dear friend of mine as well. He started reading my stuff when he was 17. It turned him around. He said he decided to become a filmmaker because of this. And
I didn't know that. That is awesome.
It was really touching. Yeah. He made the film
so
Bella.
Cool.
His very first film was Bella, and he won the Toronto Film Festival with it. So when he found I was involved with this, he got so emotional. I got so emotional hearing the beautiful story of his. But he's an incredible writer, an incredible director. Tell me a little bit about what did you feel, because this is your life, when you read this script. And then, Jordan, I'd like to hear what you've, because you have a different perspective. You're looking at it as a filmmaker per se. Tell me what your experience was, Tim.
Well, I was surprised at the courage they had to tell certain pieces of this story that I thought were too crazy because they're true, but I thought, I don't want to look like we're being sensational. But the truth is, sometimes sensational things are true. And for example, the necklace, you're going to hear about this necklace that was so personal to me. I won't tell you the story, but it's you see it in the trailer. Well, that's a real story. I mean, even including my name was on the necklace that the child gave me. Alejandro, he's able to put these things in that I didn't think should be in. I read the script and I thought this is a bad idea, but then I watched it. Oh my gosh, you pulled it off. Or how do you explain to people what child sexual abuse is without ever showing anything related to child sexual abuse? And yet he does it because he's a genius. You get just enough punch in the stomach to know what it is, but you don't get exposed to any footage that would, turn on a pedophile, let's say. So his ability to integrate all these aspects into something that's art was pretty fantastic to me.
Something Alejandro actually always says is he says, I want my films, when people get to the end, for the movement and the experience of the film to just start, right? Yes. That's one of his goals, is that when people get to the end, it's not like, well, that was a great film, awesome, I'm, done with that experience. He wants that to be the beginning of their experience with that theme or whatever it is that he wants to tell in his stories. And so, many times in the industry, you'll hear people say, well, that was a really good independent film. And the reality is Alejandro Monteverde, Rod Barr, his co-writer, Eduardo, the producer, like they are creating content and films that are not great independent films. They are just the best films in the world right now. Like they're on par with anything else out there. And so it's beautiful to see, when we got the first opportunity to actually screen the film, it was clear that at least for Angel, for us, it was like, man, we definitely want this to be a part of our ecosystem and to get this out into the world. But the key component for us, for those who aren't aware, is Angel has what's called the Angel Guild. And the Angel Guild is comprised of 100,000 investors who have invested in The Chosen and in Dry Bar and Tuttle Twins and Freelancer and all of our different original projects. And those investors are the gatekeepers of what gets to come in Angel's ecosystem. And so, we were praying, like when we submitted it to the guild, like, please, like, we hope that we're not off base here. Like we're going to feel like we're not very good at our job if our guild doesn't like this. And the guild came back, and to no surprise at all, they gave it one of the highest ratings we've ever seen. It's just, they want it. There's pent up demand for it. The film is incredible. And we're excited for the world to see it.
I am as well. Tell me a little bit, how did you get Mira Servina? She's Academy Award winner as well. I know Eduardo obviously is a star in his own right, but how did you guys get her? What was her reaction to the script? Was that a hard pursuit?
Yeah, so that was me again. I'm just realizing I got all the main actors. So Mira Servino has been an advocate fighting human trafficking for years and years and years.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, and so we were at a conference together. We both spoke in Mexico City. And I told her about this project, and I said, "Hey, would you be willing to play my wife in this upcoming film?" And she said, "Absolutely." She jumped right on it because of her heart,
Oh, wow.
And cool. So we're lucky to get her, and she did an amazing job.
How'd you get Bill Camp?
I didn't. No. I didn't get Bill, but Bill was amazing. Bill was amazing.
Man.
Oh, no, I mean, it was
like, man, I guess that was me too. I forgot.
Well, I've shown it to probably 1,000 people, 500 to 1,000 people, and maybe 1,000 now. Some ones we've done since then, and I don't have a single person that wasn't so deeply moved. Now, a lot of people came in who were very skeptical, but one of the most beautiful things that you described, and I hope people know, is you don't have to wince about coming to this. You're not going to see anything, even though the subject's terrible. That's the art of it, and yet you'll be as deeply moved as anything you could ever imagine. What was your emotional experience, Jordan, for you? You see so many great films and so many that have a spirit to them. What was different about this one for you?
Yeah, this film is I think there are a handful of films in my entire life that come to the same level of depth, heart, and soul as Sound of Freedom. You know, if I was to put a list of them out there, now not all these are in the same theme or in the same, but some of them may be, but like It's a Wonderful Life. It's one of those films where it's just incredible. One that I'll probably never see again because it was so hard to watch, but I knew I needed to watch it, was Schindler's List. Like it's just one of those films where this is a pivotal film for our society. One of the things that I think Jim said to me one time is he said, Schindler's List was incredible, but it was 40 or 50 years after what happened. He said, imagine making Schindler's List in the 1940s.
Yeah.
That's what Sound of Freedom is.
Wow.
And that's why it's so powerful, is because this is something that's happening now. It's a massive problem on a global scale. And so for us, when we watched it, it lines up with some of the greatest films ever made in our mind. And it's such a beautiful cinematic experience. Yesterday, we were in, was it yesterday or the day before? It must have been the day before. We were in Miami. Yeah. And it was people of all demographics and left, right, up, down, you name it. And the credits roll, and there was a standing ovation for a solid 3 minutes. No one would sit down. No one would stop clapping because they were just like, wow, this is incredible. And so that's the type of film it is. And when people finish it, they're going to feel this burning desire in their heart. And I think the Spirit's going to tell them, what can they now do?
Yes.
Because everybody's different, right? Everybody has different resources, different capacities. And so that's what we're excited about with Angel, is bring that awareness, and that the people in the audience can allow the Spirit to tell them, hey, here's what you need to do.
I love that. It's interesting. Tim knows this all started for me. I don't know if you know, Tim, I was doing one of my business mastery programs about 8 years ago. And I always teach people how they can grow their business. The average is 30% to 130% over 12, 18 months. But then I get them to have a bigger why. And part of the why is I have them set a bunch of goals, what they want to give and create in their life. But then there's these contribution goals. And I had people share some of them. And there were a lot of really beautiful emotional goals they want to do for their family, want to do for the world. And one woman stood up and she was so emotional. And she said, I have a dear friend whose child was trafficked. And she said that for 4 years, they went after this child trying to find it and worked with this organization. And they finally freed and found this child. And she said, I want to someday, I want to do something, in this area. And I said, well, my experience is now is the right time, So I said, how about this? I said, how much does it cost to save a child? And I think at that time she was talking about $2,500, $3,500. And I said, to save a child's life, that's it? They said, yeah. And I said, we have this audience, a couple thousand people. I said, I'll put up the first $250,000 of matching funds. You guys match me up to $250 and we'll make it work. And it was one of the most beautiful things I've ever seen. I've done it so many times since then, as Tim knows. And people started standing up out of the aisles and coming down to give us their card to make their commitment. I said, just write down what you'll commit. I'll match it, And we went to $1.2 million in a period of awesome. 30 or 40 minutes. And I was crying. Everybody's crying. It was so beautiful because, I've got 2 daughters. I've got a 48-year-old daughter and I got a 2-year-old daughter. So I have quite a breadth, 5 kids and 5 grandkids. And I can't even imagine if this was my child, boy or girl, that had gone through this experience. And so that's what started me on the journey. And then I started doing more. Then I found out about you, Tim, and Operation Underground Railroad. And we talked and I was like, I want to go see this. I don't really want to see this. I want to go on experience of this so that it's in my heart. It's beyond just what I'm imagining. Because I always say that, belief is a poor substitute for an experience. And I feel like this film gives you the experience. You can think certain things, but we have an experience, you never forget it. And we went down, as you know, Tim, to Haiti, and they marked me up with makeup and big scars and everything else. And, Tim, mention a little bit about that trip, if you would, about what we did down there.
I've heard some stories on that trip as well, Tony. And
I'll tell you.
Your voice is so distinct.
No, it was great. Well, first, after that big event in Vegas, when you raised all that money, I got a phone call that night from my mom. Did you hear that Tony Robbins just raised $1 million for you? I said, oh, Mom, you're just a rumor. Like, believe me, I would know. She's like, no, so-and-so said they were there. They called this person. They called me, because there's so many people at your events. It got back to my mom in LA, And I said, no, I promise you that's not the case. And then a couple of days later, I get a phone call. I remember exactly where I was back east on a bus, doing a bus tour of American history. And someone said, Tony Robbins wants to call you. I was like, wait, what? Like the actual Tony Robbins? And could my mom? And then there's Tony on the phone. I'm like, oh my gosh. I'm like, it's real. He's like, yes, we did this thing. And then we started setting up to take him on an operation. And it was an amazing operation. There's actually a whole documentary just about this operation. It's called Operation Toussaint. It's got over 2 million views on Amazon Prime. But it was a long-term investigation. We're looking for this little boy, didn't find him, but found the other traffickers. Then they led us to another trafficking organization, and we ended up doing an undercover meet with a group of people. One of the guys had just had provided a video that he had raped a 10-year-old girl, created videos for it, and he was trying to sell us the girl and the video. And I'm negotiating with this guy, and Tony you're just a few steps away listening to this.
I was supposed to be part of the conversation, but what happened is right before they landed on the boat, we had like 30 guys that I'm supposedly my friends that I'm funding for them to have this weekend, and we got all these different kids being brought in. It was horrific. And I'm trying to stay centered. And somebody on the boat, you would never recognize him. My wife, when I came back, she screamed. She thought somebody else walked in the house. Literally, that convinced me. But I said something, and this person on the boat said, "You're Tony Robbins." My voice was recognized. So we quickly moved me to the back. Tim negotiated. And Tim, I don't know if you remember this, but Tim's negotiating, and there were these 3 guys that had brought him on, and a woman, and she was even marketing her own child, which just, oh my God, I want to reach up and just kill them. Every part of you wants to just unleash. And of course, that wouldn't do any good. You'd be in jail, and they wouldn't be. And so I'm sitting there just staying under this state. They're kind of, I'm the guy just giving my nods and my grunts. And Tim's talking. And Tim, your ability to morph and talk to these people just blew my mind as God coming through you, because I know what you're like and who you are. And your persuasiveness was amazing. But there was a point in which Tim had a fake mustache and it was starting to peel off. And this one party, she had like a sixth sense something was going on. But fortunately, got it all done, came back, and sure enough, they were waiting for the SWAT team to come in. And remember, Tim? They weren't there. And we're like, oh my God, this is all happening. Last minute, it all came together, and we got the hell out. And we had to get out so we didn't get thrown in jail, too, because the local police didn't know what was in charge. It was wild. But I never forgot the experience. I spending those days with you, Tim, because what I also, I'm an emotional guy, and Tim's an emotional guy. We remember sitting in the car talking about stuff and just crying our eyes out for this stuff. I mean, your soul is involved in this, and you put yourself on the line so many times of just so much love for you. So I'm so grateful to be part of this. But let's talk about the mission, because that made me so mission-driven, because it gave me an experience. What do you hope that seeing this film will inspire people to do? And let's talk a little, Jordan, a little bit about what you've done with this 2 million kids are normally trafficked in a year, and what your goals are. I understand maybe you've already achieved them or are going for something bigger. But let's hear first, if you would, Tim, tell us what you hope this film will really get across to people by watching it.
Well, the mission you speak of, it's so important, but there's only so much as organizations we can do. I run the Nazarene Fund. I'm the CEO there. I'm the founder of OUR, and we've rescued thousands and thousands, and we'll rescue the hundreds, the thousands, but there's millions. Yeah. And there's I can't rescue millions. I'm stuck. And so I turned to history, and I realized there was a time in this nation's history where we liberated millions. How was it done? It wasn't the Underground Railroad led by my hero of all heroes, Harriet Tubman, whose picture sits above my mantle in my office. It wasn't Abraham Lincoln, who began his presidency saying, "I will not touch slavery where it exists." But 2 years into the war, when Lincoln met Harriet Beecher Stowe for the first time, the storyteller, the author that went viral and joined her voice with Frederick Douglass and other greats. And he said to her, "So you're the little lady that wrote the big book that started this war." Yes. That book and the voices were what changed Lincoln's perspective. And he made the war about liberating the captive. And so that's what we need. And that's how millions get rescued. Harriet Beecher Stowe is going to be the bigger hero. The storytellers, Jordan Harmon, Alejandro Monteverde, Rod Barr, Eduardo, they're going to be the actual heroes that end it, while we're continuing to rescue the ones and the twos and the hundreds. And so that's how I see this film, as a major tool that I think God can use to liberate his children.
Yeah, that is awesome. That's beautiful.
Jordan, you have such a unique approach to really getting a film like this out, because you're competing with Disney on the same weekend. This is July 4th, everybody. So it's because it's the Sound of Freedom, right? It's about freeing these kids. But tell us a little bit about the plan you came up with, and how's it going, and what can people do?
Yeah. So, first of all, like summer is the most difficult time to take something to theaters. It's the blockbuster season. The week before us is Indiana Jones. The week after is Mission Impossible. And so it's very difficult to not only book screens in theaters, but to maintain them in any meaningful way. And so when we actually, it was actually kind of a miracle that this all came together, because we've known Tim for a long time. And then Tim reached out to us a little over 3 months ago. And he said, guys, I feel a gravity. I feel an energy around what you're doing at Angel, because he saw that we were doing His Only Son in theaters and we were starting to push that in a meaningful way. And he's like, I want to explore what this looks like. And so he started pulling everybody together on his team, Eduardo and Jaime and Alejandro and all these different individuals and Jim Caviezel. And he's like, guys, come out to the office. You got to come meet these guys. And I remember telling Tim, I was like, man, we would love to. Let's get into the guild, which we did. And it scored super high. And I said, we would absolutely love to get this out to the world. But man, it's going to be so hard to pull all these parties together. And Tim's like, Jordan, have faith. He's like, this is coming together. This is coming together. And he just kept telling me that over and over and over again. And the miraculous thing is, from the time we grouped everybody together, when we inked a deal, was 5 days.
That's incredible.
It's unheard of.
That's divine. Everybody's aligned. You have a higher mission, higher purpose. When you guys first told me, I'm an executive producer as well, we're going to put this on July 4th. I was like, are you really time to do this? And we're competing with the biggest movies in the world. That's when all of them come out.
Yes.
But your approach to this, I got to say, besides higher guidance and all this, your approach to this, Jordan, I think is extraordinary. So please share with people about how you're helping to explode this so we can have enough power on that opening weekend to make this happen. We're not, it's not about economics for us. I'm donating all my money back to it. Anything that comes to it goes right back to take care of and save more kids.
100%.
So tell people about your strategy, because I think it's brilliant and it appears to be working.
Yeah. So with His Only Son, well, we had done a couple of theatrical releases, partnering with Fathom with The Chosen. We did Christmas with The Chosen, and then we did episodes 1 and 2. And we kind of thought it was kind of a weird bananas idea to just do episodes in theaters. But what we did want to do is we wanted to understand that world. And so I remember my brother Jeff telling the whole team, he's like, guys, we're going to do this, but we are going to collect as much data as physically possible so we can understand this black box that exists right now to us. Because as a studio, we had made all of our business in streaming, merchandising, that entire world. And so, so we did those. We started to understand how to crack that nut. And then we decided to go, but we realized that there was a cap on the way we were doing it with Fathom Events. And so we decided to go, we need to go direct with theaters. And we launched in the spring of this year, His Only Son. And the 3 things that I think are unique to our model is that the guild obviously finds the sleeper hits. Like His Only Son had been turned down by major studios. No one was interested in it. It was a small production budget, but it was a beautiful film. And the guild, without knowing what the production budget said, this is amazing. We want to see this. And then 2, we started building an audience through crowdfunding. Instead of going into a big bank or a big studio and saying, hey, cut us a check for $1, $2, $3 million for P&A. So P&A is the prints and advertising. Yeah. That's an old industry term for basically marketing. And that's kind of the most coveted money in Hollywood because it's the last money in and first money out. It's the most likely of getting a return. Yeah. And we said, instead of going to one person to cut a check, let's go to the crowd, because that's how we've done, we crowdfunded The Chosen, we crowdfunded Dry Bar, we crowdfunded all of our TV shows. Let's go to the crowd and crowdfund His Only Son's P&A budget. And so we crowdfunded $1.2 million in less than 100 hours. And we were like, whoa, that was way faster than we expected. And then the third element that was really powerful is those investors ended up bringing what we believe based off of our data, 10 to 20 other people to the movie theater. So now you've got your grassroots movement going. And then the last element is Angel's background. And Tony, you know this more than most people with, the Harmon Brothers agency and all the stuff that, we've been involved in one capacity or another. Our background is direct response marketing. We know that world backwards and forwards. And so we know how to spend money really efficiently and then start building the brand to where we can start getting into efficient brand marketing versus really inefficient brand marketing. And so we broke into the top 3 of the box office in spring, in Easter, which was, the third most busy time of the year. And so everybody's like, whoa, His Only Son, top 3 in the box office. And I remember big studios reached out and being like, how much do you guys spend on P&A? And we're like, well, our initial launch was a little over 1.2 million, it's like 1.5. And they were like, we've never broken in the top 3 in the box office for less than $11 to $12 million. That's impossible. Right.
Yeah, exactly.
And so what we've done is we've created this mechanism between the guild finding the sleeper hits, building the grassroots movement, and us spending that money extremely efficiently. We're seeing with Sound of Freedom now that's scaling massively. And so our goal with Sound of Freedom is very unique. There are 2 million kids that are trafficked every year, and that's a conservative estimate. Yeah. And those 2 million children, we are trying to, for opening week, to get 2 million people into seats to represent those 2 million people and start this movement that will hopefully end this atrocity throughout the world. And so you can go to angel.com. I actually think we have a URL for Tony, and I can't remember what it is now in my brain.
That's angel.com/war room. Angel.com/war room.
Anyway, so but that being said, that you go there, angel.com, or I think you can also go to /freedom if it's easy to remember. But that being said, that URL tracks, you'll see real time and we have a conservative number on there. I think we're at just under 500,000 tickets sold. Again, that's conservative. And it's really starting to scale into those last 9-10 days. And so it's really important that people do two things: that if they have the resources, go buy tickets right now, because that sends the signal to people and the theaters and gives them the courage to say, we're going to give more screens to Sound of Freedom. And that means they're pulling screens away from potentially Indiana Jones or Mission Impossible or whatever it is. So we have to give them that courage to be able to do that by buying tickets in the pre-sales. But the second thing is being able to pay it forward for someone else. Yes. So if someone doesn't have the resources, they can go. So we've already gifted from people who have paid it forward over, I think, 150,000 tickets around the United States. And we're just getting started. Okay. These are people who have paid it forward, $10, $15, $60, $100, whatever it is. And they're saying, I have the resources. I'm going to not only buy my tickets, but I'm going to pay it for someone else. And then the last thing is, if you don't have the resources, go to angel.com/freedom and you can claim a free ticket. Like we want this. We do not want money to be the reason that anybody in the United States and long-term in the world doesn't see this film.
That's so exciting. I mean, it's amazing, Deb. I think you guys are ahead about 25% right now, at least in pre-sales.
Yes.
From Rainbow Lost Ark.
And the last week is the biggest week. The last week is the biggest week for sure. We're already seeing, week over week from last week, we're up 400%. So it's growing very drastically.
I hope that those that are watching, that's the main reason I did this. I want you to see the film, but I want you to get as many people as you can. And if you can buy 10 tickets or 5 or whatever and donate to friends or donate to Angel Studios /freedom, you'll be able to
angel.com/freedom.
Get out to the people that can make this happen, and so they can attend and experience it and make it happen. Listen, this is such an exciting opportunity to take the darkest horrors. I mean, people don't realize this is one of the largest criminals, the fastest growing criminal enterprise in the world. Maybe you can comment on, Tim, what do you think, what do governments need to do? What has to be done on that side of it? And we as citizens, we can push those that we know in Congress or Senate, or those we can reach out to. What do you think has to change in order to really break the back of this trafficking epidemic?
The one word is prioritize. It's not a priority. Like it should be. I keep thinking back to Abraham Lincoln, who says, you started this war, you little lady with the big book. She changed history because she influenced him. So right now there's about 5 drug agents, federal U.S. drug agents for every 1 anti-child trafficking agent, which is insane because you can sell a bag of cocaine once. You can sell a child 10, 20 times over a 24-hour cycle. We have to change the priority. And the only way to do it in a republic that we're blessed to live in is get loud, get so loud that it shakes the foundations of Washington, D.C. and state governments. And they say, that's it. People are yelling. People are mad at us. We've got to switch this. We've got to switch this.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. The experience of being down there and having a child be chained to a bed and doing tricks 5 or 6 or 7 times a day, and an 8 or 9 or 10 or 12-year-old child is completely insane. It was the ugliest experience of my life, Tim, and it was also the most beautiful, because seeing these kids on the other side was a whole nother experience. And then we had another group, Tim, we sent the plane down. The first place they got to be in America after being rescued by you was here at our house. So they came here to the house, and they're going swimming and bowling and playing basketball, and they were like realizing, oh my God, I have a life again. But let's talk a little bit about the aftercare, because Tim, you have a really special experience in that. We went down there together, and I got to see the kind of work and wanted to contribute to it. You end up with one of your children from that group. But tell us a little bit about the aftercare, and tell us a little bit about what happens to these kids that you save afterwards as they go through, being brought back into society after such a horrific experience.
So there's no rescues, without the aftercare, without the healing. That has to happen, or nothing happens. And so we do a lot ahead of time before any rescue operation. We have the beds, we have the players, we have the homes already in place, so the kids can go immediately there and start getting all the healing and that they need. And we're trying to innovate all the time. Like, everyone's healing experience is so individual that we try to provide all the tools and let them choose with their coach, with their counselor, with their therapist. And you got to experience that. I'm glad you brought that up, Tony, because that was one of the most emotional moments of my life, was going around before we did the operation with Tony. Once we did it, we had to run. So we took a few days before to visit some of the aftercare homes where these girls were going to go. Yeah. And everywhere I went, and I hope I don't embarrass you at all, Tony, but everywhere we went, I would watch Tony give, but not just a little bit, like way too much. Like, I hang out with a lot of people of means, but this is beyond, like, wow. Like, there's certain things you might not be able to do now. It was that much, but it was every place we went to. And the final place we went to, Tony didn't even know, but the two kids that ran to him, and I talked about how they climbed up Mount Tony. They were just all over Tony because I had told them who he was. This is Papa Blanc's friend. They call me Papa Blanc, Daddy, White Daddy. I don't know why they call me that, but when they got back home, I said, just call me Daddy. You got to stop. I don't know where you get this. It might be against the law here. I don't know. But in Haiti, it was okay, apparently. So, but I watched Tony, and he didn't even know that those were my kids. I hadn't really introduced them yet because there were so many kids, right? But I watched my kids so excited because they'd seen pictures, because I see them and I tell them who's coming, and we were waiting. It took us 4 years to adopt these kids. There were two kids we rescued on February 19th, 2014, in our first operation in Haiti. That's also in a documentary, Operation Toussaint. And I watched Tony take the woman in charge around the corner. And I'm like, oh my gosh, my whole body, I'm getting chills right now. I was like, my kids are going to be okay, because you don't know really, are they just putting the nice clothes on the kids when daddy shows up? Are they really being taken care of? Do they really have what they need? And I watched Tony go around the corner. So I go around this corner, but I'm so excited because I'm like, this is going to be good. And I'm just listening. And he just, he asks her how much it's going to cost for a year. And I'm like, you're going to give a whole year? And she says this, and it's a big number. It's a lot of kids. He says, okay, I'm going to write you a check right now for 2 years. And when you're done with that, call me and we'll do the next 2 years. And I'm just like, oh my gosh, my kids are going to be home like within a year. Like, they're going to have everything they need,
That's so awesome.
And then I asked you later about it, Tony.
Thank you for that, but I wasn't asking for you to tell the story what I did.
No, I know you weren't. I know you weren't.
The beauty of the aftercare, how these kids change. And then, but I wanted you to bring up, I want people to sense of who you are as a man. You've adopted two of those children yourself. It wasn't about me, but thank you for sharing all that.
Yeah, but Tony, at the same time,
tell people how many kids you have, and tell them what happened, and with your wife, your incredible wife, both of you, how you brought these two children back. I mean, you're out here on the road. You have a pretty large family. So please, thank you for sharing that. But what I was really looking to hear is, tell people about the aftercare and what happens to these kids, because it's one thing to get them rescued, it's another to get them integrated. And there's a phenomenal work that's being done. There's so many different approaches, but I'd love you to share that. But finish the story from the standpoint of you, not me. Tell them what you did, and please tell them about your family, the size of your family, and what your wife said when you first started talking about this.
But to your point, Tony, you said you want them to hear Tim's heart. I think that probably reflects Tim's heart more than even talking about what he did. Is that he first went to talk about what you did. But yes, finish the story.
So thank you. So these kids, after the first rescue operation, and we were only 6 months into this endeavor, and I was broke. I mean, I had enough money to last till June, and this was February. And, we didn't find the little boy we went to find. And then the father, who you've met, you've been gracious enough to bring him on your stage even. And he goes in and takes home 8 of the kids that were rescued in the name of his son, even though his son wasn't there. And I'm just like, who is this man? And I go call my wife that night on February 19th, 2014. I know that because that's the birthday they gave my kids, because when we rescued them, they had no papers.
February 9th.
February 19th.
19th
is the birthday they gave them. And so I called Catherine. I said, you won't believe this guy. He took all these kids home. Da, 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 da. And Catherine goes, well, what about those 2 kids that you fell in love with? Because they were the main kids that we used in the sting operation, their brother and sister. And like, oh, their parents are dead. And, they're in an orphanage. She's like, I'm their mother. I'm like, yeah, you're the mother of everybody. Yeah. They're like, no, I'm going to be their mother. Bring them home.
Oh, that's awesome.
And I said, Catherine, we don't have any money. But then
I tell people how many kids you had before you adopted them.
That we had 6. So, and then 6 and now 7, 8. And then another one came accidentally, 9. So we got 9 now, but I didn't want to get that jeopardize my salvation speech again. So I just accepted it. I'm like, don't say it. I know.
Yes, Catherine, we will do it.
We will do it. And it's, you know what? It's the greatest blessing because these are the happiest kids, Colleen.
Oh, they're so great.
And every day they remind me why we're doing this. Because if these kids, I know the trajectory, I think about this often. My daughter Colleen would probably be dead right now. I don't think a child in Haiti who's an orphan makes it past 13 years old, or should have been trafficked. Same with my son. And instead they're happy and they're running around and playing sports and all this. And that's the hope. Like this can be any of those kids. Any of those kids have that bright of a future, but we got to get them out and get them healed. And so that's why that aftercare piece is so important. And I want to say, Operation Triple Take, which is the operation depicted in The Sound of Freedom, those kids are now young adults. Yeah. And they have their own foundation now. They're all together, and we support them. We give them microloans. One of them has actually done their own rescue. One of the kids we rescued adopted a child who was born out of human trafficking, and he saved the mother. Now he's raising this baby. Another one, her name is Angie. She's one of our spokespeople, and she just got a contract from the Colombian Navy. The same Navy that provided the boats for the CTI agents to jump out and do the rescue. And they kept tracking her. They just gave her the contract to sew. She's a seamstress, to sew all the new recruit uniforms. So it's working. Like the aftercare, it's working. And we got to see it first and foremost with the kids from Sound of Freedom.
I love that.
Also it speaks so much, doesn't it, Jordan, about who this man is, and he keeps giving his wife credit. She deserves it. She's extraordinary. But you two as a couple, because every time you go out, she's got to wonder if you're going to make it back. I'm not being overly dramatic. It's just a fact. And you risk your life that every time. And we've had some late nights when you were going through some rough times, brother, and seeing you just find your way through that because there was something higher you were to serve more than yourself, son. I'm deeply touched, and I love you dearly for all that you stand for and all that you are. And I'm so grateful, Jordan, that you've joined forces with him in such a powerful way to get this message out. Would you share one more piece before we go? Tell people a little bit about what happened in the Ukraine, because people see the war, they don't see the other side of it. And also, just maybe for 2 seconds, because the story touched me so much, the young person in Iraq, I believe it was, they were draining the blood out of them, because people don't understand that these kids don't just get trafficked and pushed through sexual slavery. But some of these children, ladies and gentlemen, it's pretty horrific. This is not in the film for you to watch. So don't panic, go see the film, but you got to know. They literally, they sell their body parts. And
That's right.
They drain their blood. It's insane.
It is insane.
A baby's heart, a young child's heart's worth $250,000. And they can steal this child or buy this child for someone for a few $1,000s. So would you just share, real quickly, a little bit about what happened in Ukraine, what you're doing there, just so people have a sense of the size and scope of what you guys have grown to? But also what happened in Iraq, for example, that you know who I'm speaking of, I think, that child Absolutely. That shouldn't have survived. And where's that child today? Because it's an aftercare example of a family adopting. It's just so touching. Amazing story. So one of the biggest, most amazing operations I've ever been a part of was last year. We went to Ukraine to just get orphans out because they were in the war zone and people weren't taking care of them and people were running away. And we ended up working with aerial recovery. And you know, Brittany and Jeremy Locke, Tony, and we were able to move with their leadership 6,000 women and children out. But while we were there, we found a pedophile trafficking ring. They were taking advantage of vulnerable children whose parents were dead, and these guys were a political party, scary group. They were fugitives from the law out of Holland, and they had set up shop in Ecuador and Mexico. And there's a docuseries, and Tony and Sage are actually producing it. Mel Gibson's also involved in this. He was one of the people who gave me the intel to find the kids. Craziest story. We blew through 6 countries, 3 continents,
4 months, took down an international pedophile ring and rescued hundreds, in preventative rescue, thousands. It ended taking down a sex hotel, a child sex hotel. They were saying little boys in Ecuador, 10 years old and younger, pedophiles could show up and have their way with them. And Tony knows so much about the case because whenever I'm traveling to Europe, I used to stop over in Miami and I'm giving you video. I'm giving Tony and Sage briefings like as I'm going transversing the country and getting blessings from Tony and Sage, and making sure my mental stability was allowing me to not break. And so we're going to have that coming out soon in a docu-series called The Hidden War, and then this other example.
Tell them an example into this, because when people think about war, they don't realize that what war creates is an opportunity for these people to traffic children like crazy because there's so much disruption. So many children become, they have no parents. But tell them the story you shared with me about this young child in Iraq. Yeah. So this little boy, it's crazy. So ISIS, when they rolled in and they took advantage and took all the minority religious children, Christian Yazidis. The same thing's happening in Africa, and they're setting up these like baby factories where they'll impregnate women and make the babies just to sell their body parts. One little boy in particular, who that was happening to him, he was kidnapped actually at 4 or 5 years old until he was 12, and they would just slowly suck like the spinal fluid, and they would sell it. This is a witch doctory kind of satanic ritual stuff where they sell the blood, and people like drink it and think they're being empowered. And it's a real thing. And this kid had lost all use of, by the time he was 11 years old, he looked like he was 7 and he couldn't use his limbs. And we were able to get him to a doctor in Salt Lake at the Children's Shriners Hospital. And they did an experimental surgery and fixed him. They broke every bone in his body. I was there just weeping at his side with Catherine as he was healing from this. And he just moaned and just the pain, but he was casted up, his whole body. But then they took the cat and it worked, and he walks now and he rides horses and he rides bikes. And while he was here, a family in Utah got to know him and they've adopted him. Oh, and so now awesome. He's home, and it's like, wow, again, it can work. They said it was impossible. He would never move. And now he's happy living in a family.
Has a family.
So there's hope. And that's the point, is there's hope. And I hope people leave Sound of Freedom knowing there's hope. There's a solution. There's a light in this darkness.
Yes, it's really a story of good versus evil, where you see good does prevail over evil, but it requires awareness and action. And this, hopefully that's what the film's doing. Jordan, any last message you want to give the audience here about this film?
Yeah, Steve Jobs once said that the most powerful person on earth is a storyteller. And we have the opportunity right now as a nation and as a world to get these stories through Sound of Freedom out into the world. And the power of stories is that the stories that are predominantly told today is what our culture will look like in 20 or 30 years.
Yes.
And we have a responsibility now to make sure that our culture in 20, 30 years does not have trafficking in it.
Yes.
And so this movie is so important to get out into the world, to educate the people on the gravity of this issue, but also to bring awareness so that the organizations, there's this saying that all ships rise with the rising tide. And there are so many organizations throughout the world, like the ones Tim has run and you've been a part of, Tony, and many, many others that are trying to solve these problems. But with awareness, with this film, the resources we believe at Angel, and the reason we're taking this on is we believe as we drive this awareness through our distribution, that the resources will pour into these organizations that are adept at solving these problems. And so a lot of people, like Tim said, there is hope. There is plenty of resources and there's plenty of good in the world. We just need focus, concentrated focus to solve these problems.
And I want to add this, Tony, because you've been great at supporting many organizations in this fight, which I applaud. In fact, some people at OUR, they might be mad at me for saying this, but they were insisting that we put the OUR logo at the end of the film. And Angel and me and Eduardo said, no. The last thing we want is to make this about any one group. Yes. Because I'll be honest, OUR is not the best at every situation. The Nazarene Fund is not the best at every situation, but IGM might be, or 821, or Free a Girl, or Ariel. We have to be able to be honest and do the right thing by the children, not by any one institution. So I'm grateful for that
100%.
that vision. And I know you run your philanthropy that way too, Tony, and it's the right way to do it. We have to empower all organizations to be a brighter light. So
amen.
You both are such bright lights. I can't wait for people to see this film. If you're watching right now, please go see it. Go see it in the theater. Don't wait for it to be at home. And please spread the word. You can share the what do you call it, the trailer. But most importantly, go to angel.com/freedom and get yourself some tickets, or you can order them. They can also order them at the theater, correct? But they
yes,
can
absolutely. Any major ticketing app, you can order tickets, but angel.com/freedom. And we are so grateful, Tony, for you and for what you've done. You know, people don't realize that this interview is obviously impactful to your audience, but Tony behind the scenes has been maneuvering and helping Angel and Sound of Freedom in such magnificent ways. So Tony, thank you. Thank you for your heart.
Kind. You're very kind. This issue takes all of us, and I'm grateful for the incredible work you're doing. And Tim, I can't thank you again for just being such a good soul and for the courage you've displayed and how you've continued to pursue no matter what obstacles in front of you. And I think when all of you watch the film, if you didn't watch anything else, it's an action thriller, and it is true story, and it is good, surpassing and dissolving and destroying the evil. And it's like based on a true story. It is a true story that'll move you. So please go check it out. Please spread the word. God bless to both of you. And we're looking forward to seeing July 4th be this incredible opening that brings millions of people to paying attention to this incredible, incredible opportunity to make change. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Thanks, Tony.
Sound of Freedom is one of those films that can legitimately change this world. So we want to ignite a fire in audiences and open their eyes to the dark reality of millions of children that need our help. Let's make this film a historic event and the the end of child trafficking. Theaters across this country are already selling out. Pre-order your tickets today, and you can send the message that God's children are no longer for sale.